Hi there, everybody. So you may have heard about this game, Thrasher, which, as they just mentioned, was the inaugural first ever Apple Vision Pro Game of the Year last year. And before we tell you about the game, we just want to show you the game. If you haven't seen it, and if you haven't played it, make sure to stop by our booth over in the games pavilion after the talk. So if you were here for Ryan McLeod's talk earlier, you heard him talk about the castle in the sky, the big idea that you come back to when you're working on a game. Our castle in the sky is a little bit different and a little bit weirder, a little bit stranger. And we're really excited to talk you through a game that we loved to work on and that we think you'll love to play.
So Puddle is the studio responsible for Thrasher and had a two-person core team. Brian is the brilliant mind behind the art and music of the game. His previous game, Thumper, is critically acclaimed hit that found success both in its visceral VR version as well as being available widely across traditional platforms. And I'm Mike, responsible for the technology side of the game and sharing in the design duties with Brian. I've been focused on immersive games for the last 10 years. And prior to that, I spent a decade plus working on music games at developer Harmonix, games like Rock Band. And that's actually where Brian and I first met. We first collaborated on a music visualizer for VR that released for the PlayStation VR 1.
And I'm Doug Northcook. I'm the CEO and creative director at Creature, where we run both a game studio and also a publishing label. And our publishing label, we support 11 studios that are making XR games on every major platform, on MetaQuest, on PlayStation VR 2, on Pico, and also on the Apple Vision Pro. And we were lucky enough last year to publish Thrasher, the Apple Vision Pro Game of the Year, Maestro, the MetaQuest Game of the Year, and then my studio, we built a game called Starship Home, which won the DICE Award for Technical Innovation in Immersive Technology. So we've had a very exciting year, but I think Thrasher was one of the first games that we saw when we were starting our publishing label, and Mike and Brian showed me a very early version, and immediately I was struck by the visuals, the audio, and the feeling of the game. And I knew that there was something really special here that we wanted to try to help bring to every immersive platform. And at that time, Apple Vision Pro, I don't think, had even been announced. This was like a year and a half before. And we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And so today, we're going to walk you through a few things. We're going to talk about what is Thrasher, how we kind of found the visual identity, the feeling of the game, and then how we took a game that was never intended for the platform that it ended up on, and how we made it really shine and really, really great, specifically on the Apple Vision Pro. We'll talk a little bit about the broader XR ecosystem and the challenges that independent developers face, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of what we see is coming next.
So Thrasher is an arcade odyssey and audiovisual experience with an innovative control scheme and mesmerizing alien world. You guide your space seal with the wave of your hand, evolving it from a tiny worm to a mega beast to take on wild bosses across 9 psychedelic realms. The game is also designed for casual players to vibe out in, but also has a deep combo system to keep score chasers competing on the leaderboards and perfecting their runs.
There's something that we talked about a lot as we were working together to bring Thrasher to the world. And one of those early on was this idea that there's something really, really special when you have a game that is both visually very compelling, but the sound is also as compelling. And Brian, the art director and the composer for the game, has this really magical ability to blend those two things. So what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're hearing is all one feeling, right? It's all one piece that comes together. And there's something about that the Vision Pro is so amazing at doing, right? Because the screen is strapped onto your face, right? And you can't leave. You can't escape the world of Thrasher once you're inside. And that helps you to build this really deep emotional connection to this strange alien world because you are there, you feel it, you hear it. And that's something that's really, really unique and really, really unique to the experience on Vision Pro, but just because of the fidelity of the device and how much better that is than any of the other platforms that we've worked on.
So when we start our XR projects, we like to start by thinking about what feels satisfying physically, because the player is embodied in the experience. And in a way, isn't that the point of VR? To bring your body into the simulation. So considering what the player does with their body is core to building something compelling. We were inspired early on by ribbon dancing with its free-flowing motion that's mesmerizing to watch and accessible to everyone. And it seemed like it could form the basis for a satisfying control scheme. We also love classic arcade games and began thinking about adapting Snake. Snake is that game where you need to grow large and try not to run into your own body. We also love the idea of a game centered around a creature that needs to grow big because the stereoscopic displays on a VR headset allow you to experience scale so viscerally. So here's a look at how that core inspiration of ribbon dancing translated into the control of the space eel in the game. Players have found this to be one of the most magical things about the experience because the creature almost feels like an extension of your own hand. It's like reaching out with an extended form of proprioception.
And proprioception is the feeling of your physical body in space, right? The space that your body occupies. And when you're playing Thrasher, you get this sensation that your body moves out into digital space beyond your hand and goes into the eel. And so if you don't know exactly what we're talking about, you'll have to come to the booth, put on the headset, and feel it for yourself.
And so here's an example of how that simple core expands into a fast and fluid system with advanced maneuvers stacked on top, all while remaining as simple and accessible as possible. You can create circles, which are a special move that can destroy obstacles and extend combos, or use one of many power-ups in the game, like the power dash shown here, where with a simple pinch and drag, you can destroy everything in your path. So before we talk about our journey onto Vision Pro, I wanted to discuss how the game's concept evolved during the prototyping process. Here's the first prototype we made for Thrasher. It's a simple creature that follows the tip of a stick, allowing you to whip it around like a ribbon. It felt really satisfying and super promising mechanic for a game, but what exactly should that game be, and where should we go from here? Well, that ended up being a 3-year process in the end, but we temporarily adopted some mechanics from Snake and started building. One of the things I've learned over the years doing prototypes is this concept of building the toy before you build the game. The idea is to find the fun core and satisfying moment-to-moment experience before you plan the broader game rules or the metagame that form the larger experience of the game. This way, it allows you to have happy accidents, learn what makes your experience really shine, so that you can then focus on amplifying this core as you build the full game. I think this is even more important for XR experiences because you need to justify the friction that's necessary for someone to put on a headset and play your game. So making sure that it feels satisfying and native to the medium is extra important. For us, this was a 6-month-plus process of honing the feel of the controls before committing to the larger game and on top of that satisfying moment-to-moment core. So one area that we focused on quite a bit early on was just the basics of moving the space eel around, with the goal of making it super satisfying just on its own to move it around. And this is sort of like in a Mario game. You could strip away all of the level design and just have a good time running, jumping, wall jumping, and flipping. And so we wanted to make sure that our game had that before we started designing levels. So once we had a basic segment in creature working and following the path of movement, we iterated a lot on how its body reacted to turns, but especially speed. So things like the little wiggly bits undulating as you move slowly, and then stiffening and stretching the body of the eel when you move quickly. All of these little things add together to make it satisfying to steer the space eel around. One of the downsides of the early prototype was that it was pretty fatiguing for your arms over long sessions, because initially we had you moving your hand in Z-space to control it. And while we love games with physicality, we really wanted to be able to vibe out lazily on the couch, and actually wish there were more VR games that do this. So we discovered that mapping all of the space eel's movement to the surface of a sphere made it easy to point to a location with little effort, but still retain a lot of nuance. It also makes the gameplay elements more ergonomically visible to the player. And as a bonus, it made it quite adaptable to a wide array of gestural styles, including like big physical movements, because everything gets captured and filtered down into pointing into the sphere. So early versions of the game used a simple cursor to show where you were guiding the space eel to. And it worked fine, but we really wanted to create a stronger physical connection between the player and the space eel, and avoid having two focal points for your eyes to track. Eventually, we tried adding this bendy tether that connects your hand, the player's hand, to the eel, and it really gives you this powerful feeling of dragging the eel along instead of just pointing. And so when you aim really far away, you get this big, juicy bend in the tether, and then you feel that force of the player pulling the eel through the world. Now, some of you might be familiar with the concept of adding juice to a game. This is the feedback that makes the game feel great to play. But we like to focus on a different kind of audio-visual juice that explores the direct connection between musical timing and visuals. We think this draws your mind deeper into a flow state, almost subconsciously. Nintendo does this a lot in their games, often animating background elements to the beat. And we feel like this adds a subtle cohesion that draws you into the world. So in this first example, I'm going to show you some objects that are pulsing to the beat, as well as moving along their motion path in phase with a musical phrase. We also orchestrate more audiovisual juice in the transitions between waves. And this is where after each wave, your space eel transforms into a more majestic creature. The new wave slams in, and simultaneously new layers of music enter the mix. And all of this is scheduled to arrive on a measure boundary in the music.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about a lot as we were working on this, part of this idea of juice, this idea of making the game feel great, that a big part of that is that early on, it was Mike and Brian, and then sometimes me and a couple of people on our team playing the game. And what we tried to do pretty early on in development was try to get other people to come in and play the game. And so we established a Discord server. We started getting other people to play it, provide their feedback. And what we found pretty quickly was that we were actually the worst people at playing the game, and that the fans were playing the game in ways that we never expected them to play. They were playing faster. They were chaining combos in new ways. They were finding that the toy was actually something that we didn't even expect, right? And that the thing that we had made was actually better in some ways and worse in others. And so part of that, right, is a reminder to all of us, and sometimes we forget this, is that you need to bring people very early into that process to help you find what makes the toy so compelling. And that those are the people that have stuck around, and now that we're working on new versions of the game, some of those same people from that original group are the ones that are actually like some of their playthrough footage is what ends up in gameplay trailers, and in some of the footage that you're even seeing here today is actually captured by users and not by us, right? Because at this point, like, we are not the people that have the high scores on the leaderboards in the game. It's the players, so.
I have the number 10 spot on one of the levels, but it's the best I can do. So once you've built your toy, you now have the task of building out the full content of the game. And it's a good time to take stock of what's working and not working and make changes to the game to reinforce the things that feel fun. One of the things we realized is that going fast feels really great. And actually, in the early playtests, we had people that would play the game and sort of like move a little bit and then stop and then move a little bit. And that was not the experience that we wanted, but the game really wasn't encouraging you to go fast. So we added a time limit, and we also made your score be how much time remains on that clock so that we could add bonuses and combos could add time to the clock. So now it was clear that going fast is how you succeed in the game. Another thing getting in the way of the game were mechanics that we inherited from that original inspiration of Snake. Like in Snake, we had a thing where running into your own body would cause damage, and that would make you play super delicately, which impedes that reckless speed that we want, so we had to cut that feature. So it's always a lesson to try to reevaluate what you think is really important to your game and listen to what the game is telling you. So making elegant swooping motions and graceful arcs or thrashing the creature around felt super satisfying, and that knowledge helped us design new power-ups that encourage those motions. So for example, the thrash gun, when you pick it up, you have a brief period of time that you can sort of whip the character, the eel around, tracing a path that a rainbow spray of bullets will emerge from. So the faster you whip it around, the more bullets you get. And then there's the thrash ball, which is this metal marble that you can bump into, and then it'll sort of crash through things. And that one, if you do a graceful arc in just the right direction, you'll get exactly the result that you want. Now, I don't think we would have come up with these power-ups at all if we had not designed that toy and let it inform the power-up design. Another satisfying thing we discovered was making circles with the space eel. And this was a hard one. We had a hard time trying to leverage this in the game. We had tried a bunch of things. We had tried things like making different shapes, and that would spawn power-ups for you. But eventually, we found a path as we were developing a combo system to encourage replayability for advanced players. We were inspired by games like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which lets you string together these huge combos, and there's always this risk of losing it all. So circling turned out to be a great way to start a combo. So you do a circle, and then a little timer appears, and it's sort of ticking down. And then if you crash through a bunch of crystals, you'll be able to accrue time that you're going to add on to the clock. And then you can circle again and refill that timer and give yourself more time. But again, if you take damage, you lose it all. Hazards that normally you have to avoid could be circled to destroy them. Now they're out of the way. And they can reward you with a multiplier. So now circling became this core way that players can find creative ways to play the game. And still people are surprising me with the crazy ways they figure out. I don't actually have a video of the top scoring player on Thrasher, but I have no idea how they got the score they got. So now let's talk about the journey onto Apple Vision Pro. I just wanted to note that we were quite far into development of Thrasher when the opportunity to work with the Vision Pro came up. And we were fortunate to find that it was a really great fit for the platform. But it definitely wasn't an easy process.
I remember Mike calling me one day and basically saying, "Have you heard of what Apple is doing?" And I was like, "Go on, tell me more." And I think we were both pretty shocked to find that the real kind of best version of the game would be pretty quickly unlocked on a platform that we had never even seen before. So
totally. So anytime you bring an existing project to an emerging platform, you can expect some hurdles as you're essentially using a moving target in terms of the APIs and the operating system. Often you're not sure if the thing you're seeing is a bug that you've created or a bug in the operating system, and the documentation is constantly in flux in light. So Thrasher was built with Unity as a fully immersive app using the Metal rendering backend. This creates the maximum flexibility in terms of rendering, but has some limitations that we'll discuss. We didn't use Unity's polyspatial, which allows you to do mixed reality experiences and lets you use some of the platform level features like the shared space, which allows spatial apps to run side by side. But polyspatial has limits on rendering, which must be done by the operating system. So just keep in mind that my advice here is limited to fully immersive apps using the Metal backend. So unless you're starting a new project, be prepared for some pretty painful upgrades. New platforms tend to require the latest release of Unity, so we had to upgrade that. And many of the new features are going into the latest Unity. We also built the visuals with hundreds of shaders that were optimized for the gamma color space, something that we're used to working with to create these milky gradients that you see in the game. But the latest XR platforms have adopted the linear color space, which required a painful upgrade process for us. And if you'd like to know a little bit about how we did that, find me after. The built-in render pipeline is what we were originally using, and while it's allowed on the Vision Pro, it results in low-resolution output because you can't turn on foveated rendering, which is necessary to get the full resolution of the device. So at the very least, if you're starting a new project, use URP, use linear color space, and use the newest supported release of Unity. So to me, the Vision Pro is an absolutely amazing platform. It's got a lot of new ideas, an extremely polished user experience, and I think it's having a really positive influence on the industry. There were a couple quirks that I wanted to mention here that we encountered as we were developing the game. A lot of us know that in order to make a comfortable experience in VR, you need to have smooth performance. But there's a couple places I found that you can sort of cheat on the edges of this. I'm used to, say, loading into a level, fading to black, and then maybe doing some expensive operations that you can't really break up, and then fading up from black, and no one can tell that maybe your game had glitched. However, we found out the operating system will quit an app if it glitches or it doesn't generate a new frame for 2 seconds. So you have to be aware of that and make sure that you're able to split up some of these expensive operations to avoid crashing. Another thing that takes some time to wrap your head around are the privacy limitations around eye gaze data on the platform. The way it works is that apps can only access eye data at the moments that your fingers pinch, which is a sort of implicit permission to access that sensitive data. The exception being for handling highlights that you're looking at. When you look at something, it needs to know where your eyes are looking before your fingers pinch, but those highlights are rendered by the operating system. So the implication is if you're making a fully immersive app that does its own rendering, you can't use the gaze and pinch UX, which means that it's a bit of a bummer because some players come in expecting that to work, but it does mean that you'll need to spend extra time trying to find a model that works for your game and iterate and test on that so players can understand.
And I've been talking about this with a lot of people since we got here, but I think one of the things that we really talked about a lot when we were developing this is who is this game for? How are we going to release it? And will it make any money? Which is the question that many developers ask, right? And I think a big thing for us early on was, one, trying to build some of that audience early on, trying to find some of those people who we thought would become those hardcore fans who have stuck around through the development process. And that the other piece there is that there are multiple audiences. There are multiple groups of people that are going to pay attention to your game when you release it, right? There are the players, the fans. There are the platforms, right? And so for us, that was our partners at Meta, our partners at Apple, and how they were going to perceive the game. There was also our friends, our families, all of these other people, right? And really trying to understand, why are we making this game? Are we making this for ourselves? Are we making this for the platform? And I think really, at least with Thrasher, in the end, this was really something that Mike and Brian needed to make, and they needed to make it in the way that they made it. And really trying to focus in on this quality experience, this quality product that was very much made for the audiences that Mike talked about earlier, which are people that want to experience the feeling of being in the game is one group of people, and then the other group are people that want to try to get the highest score possible. They're trying to chase other people up the leaderboards, and we really just tried to optimize building the game for both of those groups of people, while at the same time trying to make sure that throughout the development process that we were sharing constant updates with our partners at Apple, inviting them into the process, getting their feedback and their advice. Mike was just telling me earlier today about early conversations that he had with Linda, one of the design evangelists at Apple, who's around here somewhere this week, and the feedback that she gave that became critical to how we actually ended up kind of redoing some of the design of the game, right? And so part of that is that the audience informs how your product becomes a quality product. And that you have to be open to listening to those people, getting that feedback, and then refining in that direction.
So until we got serious on the Vision Pro, the game had actually been built on the Meta Quest using controllers with very basic hand tracking support. So we really needed to overhaul the hand controls. One thing that I've learned about gestural controls over the years is that players will always surprise you in the wide array that they perform the same task, even if it's simple. So you really have to build the detection to be resilient to a wide array of styles and play test a lot. We also wanted to support a wide array of gestures, allowing for maximum player expression for that deeper mind-body connection with the space eel. We noticed that there's a real magic on the Vision Pro, seeing that low latency feed of your hand inside of a VR environment. It's something that I hadn't seen before. And there's almost like this mind control-like feeling of wiggling your finger and seeing the space eel respond. So we set out to support as many ways to guide the space eel as we could, from just moving your index finger to waving your entire hand around to steering with a closed fist. One of the main guiding principles that we had as we tackled the hand controls was maintaining sensitivity and control no matter how your hand moved through space. And since headsets use cameras to track your hands, this involves an understanding that the sensitivity and reliability of that data can degrade when parts of your hand are occluded from view from the cameras. So one example shown here is how we deal with the controls when you have a closed fist. So when you close your hand, your fingertips are likely occluded. So you don't want to rely on that for control signals. So what we do is that we detect when your hand is in a fist, and we anchor the pointing direction that you can see here in white to a point further up on your hand, actually on the knuckle. And so if you were to open your hand again, we detect that, and then we anchor to your fingertip, giving you that nuance again.
Yeah, something we talked about here too, and that we joke about sometimes, is that when you're doing this and you're designing a game for hand tracking, is that you're not, unlike designing for a game controller where everyone, for the most part, is going to use the exact same controller, and they're probably going to use it in the same way, is that everyone's hands are different, right? And the controller is made of meat, and the meat is you, right? And so you have to, again, you have to get a lot of people to play. You have to get a lot of people with different sized hands to play and see how they play, how the gestures work, and then refine it from there, right? Which is very, very difficult to do. Okay, so we're gonna take a little bit of a departure from the deep dive into Thrasher and kind of talk a little bit more about, as kind of we've been working on Thrasher, Thrasher has kind of followed the journey of the XR ecosystem over the last 3 years. And like Mike said, we originally started thinking about Thrasher primarily originally as a game that would be on the Meta Quest. And at the time, that was on the Meta Quest 2. And then we saw the Meta Quest 3, and then we saw the Vision Pro. And now, right, we're also waiting for Google and Android XR and these other devices. And all of this has created an incredibly challenging environment for developers. And we have now released multiple games that exist on every major XR platform. And that means all of the work that we just described that went into making Thrasher, you have to do all of that work again on every single platform and make sure that the game feels amazing with how that platform handles hand tracking, how that platform handles rendering, which is something that we hope will get better, but we kind of expect that it's not going to, and that we're going to continue to see this increasing fragmentation of how every platform is going to handle these core interactions. And that the other thing that we expect, and that Meta has announced, is that we'll see this transition to AI glasses and transparent displays, which will, again, reinvent this. So this is a graph that was put out by this data analyst named Matthew Ball. This is part of a much larger report that he did on the state of the video game industry as a whole. And this is a single segment from his slide on AR, VR shipments and actual forecasts. And what you see here is things go up, and we were up here, and this is about the time that we started talking about Thrasher. So we were really up high. We were feeling pretty good because we were like, ooh, we're going up. And then what happened? It did not go up. It went down, right? And I think this is another piece of this. And like, you know, I've been working in XR for 12 years now, and I've watched this do exactly this for the last 12 years. What is different about this moment, and why I think this conference in particular is so exciting, is that now we have the first XR device that is actually a computer. Because the MetaQuest, all the previous devices were either tethered to a desktop computer or are basically a mobile phone strapped into a headset. And that there's a type of game, a type of application that can only live on a device like Vision Pro because of the computing power, the maturity of the tools, and that's where we're back in this kind of flat space, right? And we don't expect that it's actually going to change that much in the next year or two, but that there's something here that the Vision Pro is unlocking, which is that this is really just the beginning, right? That we, like, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I thought 12 years ago was the beginning, and it is not. And at this point, we're getting old. There are some other old VR people in the room as well. You guys know where you are. I see you. And what's exciting to me, and I've gotten to talk to some people here and talk to some Chinese developers who are much younger than we are, and I am very jealous of you because you get to build games and applications on the first spatial computer, and we had to build our first applications on a pile of junk. And so we're very excited for you, and I'm very inspired by a lot of the work that a lot of you are doing and some of the demos that I've seen here, because we are really just getting started. And it's a very exciting time to be doing this work. And we hope that you will follow us and hopefully make the next Vision Pro Game of the Year. Though you will have to compete against us because we will have some new games coming to Vision Pro, so best of luck to you. And then what we would also like to do is invite you to come to our booth and see a little bit of what's next for Thrasher, which is that Thrasher is coming everywhere.
Yeah, iPads, you'll see a gamepad version. We've spent the last 6 months really trying to find the identity of Thrasher, maintain that identity of Thrasher with these other input devices, and we'd love to get your feedback on how we're doing.
Yeah. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
好，非常感谢 Dog 给我们带来的精彩的分享。然后我们现场有没有哪位小伙伴想要对他们进行提问的？有没有什么疑问想要跟他们答疑解惑的？快，我们要倒计时。哎，这边这位好。
Wait. Hello, Mike and Doc. Thank you for the speech. It was fantastic. So I'm Alex. I'm from a company, VR company, SoSync. I'm a creative partner. So I have a question regarding like you guys, when you guys making creative decisions. So why EO?
Well, if Brian were here, he might give you a deeper mind meld on that. But that inspiration of ribbon dancing, how do you turn a ribbon into a creature or something that feels like it can exist in a world? And this is Brian's world, his aesthetic. And he had created a game called Thumper, and Thumper actually had a boss that looked a little bit like this. It was sort of like a millipede-like creature, and he was really excited about like how compelling a segmented creature like that can look. And so a lot of it is the art direction of Brian in this case, but also taking something abstract like a ribbon and then trying to give it personality and give it a character. This was one direction that you could go.
Got it.
But also when we first started talking about the game, I don't even think we knew what to call it. And then I think at one point we were like, I guess it's an eel. It's a space eel. And then we just kind of stuck with it. But I think the reality is we still don't know what it is. But this is just something that came out of Brian's mind, and then we just called it an eel.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
好，
Great question.
好，还有没有其他的小伙伴有疑问想要提问的？有吗？ 那边。
Hello, my name is Kara. I'm an investor in XR apps, and also I'm a blogger on XR contents. I love Thrasher, tried it last year on Vision Pro, really love it. My question is, what do you think on the UGC maybe in the future for music selections?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to do that. A lot of people who play the game ask for like a chill mode or something like that they can just vibe out it and not have hazards and not have scoring. And so I'm not announcing anything, but I just think that it would be great to use music perhaps from other artists that have different vibes, create worlds, create versions of the eel that feel those different vibes to allow the game to kind of evolve while we let the game that you see today, it is a cohesive sort of experience, but DLC can let us sort of explore these other vibes that I think would be really fun to do. Yeah.
好，还有没有其他的小伙伴有问题的？可以举手。哎，这边。
Hello, I'm also a game developer, and my game is called Alia. It's on Steam. It's a puzzle game. It's also 3D, and we're planning to put it on Vision Pro. And I would like to ask, what is the most challenging thing when you switch to Vision Pro as a game development medium?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, and we talk about this a lot, is, and Ryan talked about this in his talk earlier, is that you're moving like literally into another dimension, right? That you have to translate your work off of the screen and into the room here, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge, especially when you're trying to adapt an existing game from another platform, and that often that work of reinventing your game is more work than building a brand new game, right? A new concept that really only makes sense on that platform. And there are some rare exceptions, and we have a couple of games that I've worked on where the core concept of the game can be moved. Like I worked on Among Us VR, where we took Among Us and made a VR version of it, which meant taking a 2D game and making it into a 3D game and rebuilding a lot of the core mechanics, right? So it's very challenging, but I think part of that, and I think this was why Ryan's talk this morning was so good, which is that, you know, you have to go back to like what is essential, what is the magic, right? And try to connect into that. And then there are also very difficult technical problems, like a lot of that we described here. So.
I just want to, I can't overemphasize how important it is to make things that feel good with your body. Your body is in the game. So your mechanic, it's not an abstract stick that you're pushing or a button that you're pressing. It's your body performing an action. And if that feels satisfying, that's a good way to anchor the experience and know that it's going to feel good to play.
Yeah, I think with that too is that it has to feel so good. It has to be, because, right, if someone's going to put the headset on, it has to be better than your game is on Steam. It has to be better than your game is on any other platform. And it has to be one of the best things that I can ever do, right? Because like if I'm playing a game on my phone, the game can be kind of bad. It maybe doesn't even have to look that good, but I maybe don't care, right? Because I'm only playing it for a couple of minutes at a time. I can open it up in 2 seconds, right? But if I'm going to play a Vision Pro game, I have to be very intentional, right? I have to decide, I'm going to get my headset. It has to be charged. I have to put it on. I have to boot up the app, right? There's a lot that you're asking the user to go through. And so it has to be so good. So I hope you do it, and I hope it's great. And then you should send it to us so we can see it.
Thank you. Thank you for all your advice. Thank you.
好的，那我们还有最后一个问题。现场还有哪位小伙伴想要有提问的？那边还有一位。
Thank you for your wonderful sharing. This is Luna from Gen Fund. I have several questions for you. You just mentioned that it's crucial to find the audience in the first place. So how do you find the audience during your development process? And what characteristics do you see in your audience? And is the audience group somewhat different from the audience on other device platforms like Quest? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think It really depends on the project and on the game. One of the games that we released last year, this game called Maestro, we found early on, we released a demo of the game almost 2.5 years before we actually released the game. And what that gave us was an opportunity to find users, get them to group together, get them talking together, get them talking to us. And that worked very well. So we had a really, really amazing number of people that downloaded the game. I think with Thrasher, it's been very different, which was that, right, this is a pretty weird game. It's for a very specific kind of group of people. And I think that's part of why we're now investing in bringing it to other platforms so we can find more of those people, right? But it's really a big question, and I think especially like where we are in the development of these platforms, you know, like the MetaQuest platform, there are a lot of users, but there is a massive amount of content. On the Vision Pro, there are very, very few users, but there's even less content, right? And so I think that's where the Vision Pro right now is a very exciting space if you're willing to invest in the long term, right? Because I think part of this, and I think this is part of why Apple can be such a great partner here, is that the ecosystem has to build together, right? And that it's the developers and the platform that have to build that audience together. Because I think the reality is we don't know who the Vision Pro like real audience is, right? Until we see what the next version of the headset is, and do people adopt that, right? Because I think one thing, having worked in the space for such a long time, is that most people have still never put a headset on. And I think that the real best users who will be the most excited about the technology have still never even tried it, right? And that to me is the bigger challenge, and that's why what we've done in a lot of cases is we try to really focus on finding and connecting with users who don't even own a device yet, right? And that they see a video somewhere, right, on YouTube or on TikTok or on some other platform where they see something and they're like, wow, I want to be wherever that is, right? I want to feel whatever that is. And then they're like, oh, I need this device to do that. And in a lot of cases, we've had, you know, users come back, reviews come back, where people say, like, I bought the device for this game initially, which is very, very exciting. So.
Thank you for your reply. That's amazing.
好的，非常感谢两位的精彩分享。